Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey, Pete. All right, we're talking about Halo. Give us a summary of episodes 2 and 3 that we watched this week.
All right. Episode 2, Master Chief. We see him go travel to visit his friend with Quan. When he arrives, he learns about the relic and its link to a super weapon of some kind. He leaves Quan, the girl, with his friend Soren at this unknown location and promptly goes back home to the UNSC where he gets arrested. In episode 3, we learn about Cortana, and it gets installed, the artificial intelligence gets installed into Master Chief as a way of controlling him. With Cortana's help, Master Chief learns about his home planet where he was born and raised, and the existence of a second relic, which could also lead to the location of this super weapon. And at the end of the episode, Master Chief and Halsey leave the UNSC to go visit the home planet to find that second relic.
And we also see the starts of the cracks between Master Chief and his team, where there starts to be a little bit of skepticism and doubt in terms of whether Master Chief is still the same reliable Spartan that they always view him as.
That's right. And now on to the main episode with our full recap.
Okay, Pete, welcome back. Another episode of Films and Stuff.
Hi, Ethan. How are you?
Everything is great. How are you doing this afternoon?
I am okay. What are we talking about today?
Today, we have Halo. We did the initial episode last week, and now we have episodes 2 and 3 are out. We've both seen them. Episode 4, I think, is coming out tomorrow. So we can go through episodes 2 and 3 if you're up for it.
Yeah. So I think episode 4 actually probably comes out next week, right? At the time of recording. The good thing is that because with our hiatus from last week, it gives us a little bit of time to digest the series.
Digestion is good.
And what do you think? Where are you standing right now? If you let's give our ratings now. Where are you on Halo?
So as I recall, we both watched the inaugural episode, and we were both kind of like, cool costume. Okay, it was all right for a first episode. We weren't hooked, but we thought it was intriguing enough to continue on. And now, having watched 2 and 3, I think we have a better sense of where we stand for this show. And I have to say, I'm very unenthused, I guess I would say. I'm very unenthused for this series, despite my high hopes. And I feel like I'm giving a lot of leeway and rope to the writers and the creators, hoping that they show me something, but I'm just not feeling it yet.
Yeah, I think that with all that rope, they've managed to tie themselves up and put themselves onto a railroad track to be run over by a train that is the Halo fan base, because that
sounds very disaster-like. Yeah,
I'm not just with you. I'll take it one step further. I'll say they might actually have, unless something rights the ship drastically, and I mean really dramatically changes. I'm going to not just stick to my guns and say that this is a skip, but I'm going to say that this is a skip, dig a hole, bury the series in the hole, refill that hole, and then never mention the series again.
I'm really... Let's talk about where this is going wrong. What do you think is the problem with this show? I think there's more than one problem, but what are like the elements that you think are just wrong from the start?
So my feeling is that the producers are trying to make this more of a drama / political intrigue show. when the Halo franchise isn't exactly known for that, right? There's a little bit of intrigue, don't get me wrong, but there's certainly no political intrigue. There's no, underhanded dealings one way or another, no political espionage, no sabotage, that kind of thing, or very little of it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm just not interested in seeing the political sniping that's happening behind the scenes between Halsey and the other admirals in the UNSC, and this struggle for power. I'm just not in it. It's not doing anything for me.
So can we say that the first problem is there's no action? I mean, Halo is a franchise about the Sentinels that have very great costumes and helmets and body armor, which has evolved a little bit, from game to game generation. And we're not seeing any of that, right? We're actually seeing the main character, Pablo Schreiber, spend more time outside of his armor than we see him with his helmet on so far.
Yeah, in fact, to the point where actually in episode 2, you raise a great point here. We actually see him not just without his helmet on, but like without his armor at all. Like he's in his I guess jumpsuit or whatever, the thing that you would wear underneath that armor.
His Under Armour. His Under Armour.
Right. And this is not sponsored by Under Armour.
No, should be.
But it's just, it's strange to me to see him almost seem so exposed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And vulnerable. And I don't mean vulnerable like emotionally because, Master Chief, and what emotions are we seeing? We're not seeing much emotion here. And that's fine. That comes with the territory of playing, a genetically modified, like almost semi-robot.
Yeah.
So that's the first problem. And I just think you're right. There's not enough going on screen in terms of effects, in terms of action, in terms of anything that would have made the franchise popular.
I have to say, I think apart from episode 1, there's been no action. I don't think there's been any round of a bullet fired. I don't think there's been a punch thrown. I cannot recall. There's been very little, even like aircraft flying. There's been really no action. It's, as you mentioned, it's taken an action video game series, right? Which is a shooter game, and it's turned it into a drama.
Yeah, it almost feels like House of Cards in space to me right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of potential for backstabbing. I don't get it. I just don't get it. And the things that I want to see more of, we're not being shown more of. And it's really disappointing so far.
So there's supposed to be, the basis of Halo is, I don't know if it's good versus evil, but it's there is a battle, right? It's the Sentinels versus the aliens, right?
Well, it's the Covenant.
Yeah, the Covenant, right? We're not. Are you buying into this? Like, I just don't see enough actually intrigue between those two factions, like to take a side either way, right?
It's too slow
removed.
to determine at the moment. I think the Covenant are after this ancient artifact, which will lead them to the Halo. Right? Or to a Halo. And the humans have it, but they don't know what it is. They have, by the end of episode... So in episode 2, you see that the Master Chief has... At the end of episode 1, he kind of bucks orders and breaks away and goes off into space, right?
Yeah.
And then episode 2, you see him meet up with a friend of his, or a quote-unquote friend of his, who was a part of the Spartan program with him as a kid.
Yeah.
Right? But he managed to get away, and he harbors, of course, some ill will against the whole Spartan program because he wasn't brainwashed the way John has been, or Master Chief has been.
Yep.
And he's in this like outlaw colony, which was very, for me, reminiscent of like almost like Nowhere from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is kind of like this mining outpost town.
Yeah.
It had these like crazy tram cars that are flying off into space and connecting last second with ropes and wires that are hanging around. So it had so that's where he goes. He meets up with him to try to get a little bit more intel to figure out what's going on. He finds out that the artifact and the relic that he's got is some kind of map or homing device or something like that that can lead them towards an ancient weapon that's supposed to be this all-powerful thing that he still doesn't know what it is really. We, of course, as viewers, know it to be Halo. He leaves that annoying kid that he saved in the first episode there.
Yep.
And then the end of episode 2, I thought, like, set up something really cool was he gives himself up, right? He goes back to the UNSC and he gets arrested for betraying his orders. And I thought, okay, this could slow episode, but exposition heavy, no problem. Maybe this sets up something cool for episode 3 where his squad kind of breaks out of their training to break him out. I was hoping that there would be some action, but no. I think episode 3 was more of the same. We get introduced to Cortana, which again is another slap in the face. I don't like what the showrunners have done to the Halo mythos, right? Yeah. They've changed a lot of it, and I think a lot of it is them saying we're changing it because we don't want to be like the game. And so we're going to change things for the sake of changing things rather than change things to make them actually better.
How is Cortana portrayed in the game?
So in the game, she's an artificial intelligence, which she is here too. But she wasn't a clone of Halsey that was like literally a clone who then gets destroyed and her consciousness gets uploaded into this artificial intelligence chip. And then, for me, even worse than that, Cortana in the show, they're saying, is a way of not just enhancing the Spartans, but replacing their consciousness, right? Whereas in the game, that is absolutely not the case. Like Cortana couldn't take over Master Chief, but here we actually see Cortana take over Master Chief. So I don't know. I just found that whole thing to be a bit of a slap in the face, right? Because Cortana is a great character in the video games. She also is a great foil to Master Chief. But here, I don't see it. And maybe it's just because it's only one episode, and maybe it's because I'm a fan of the games and I didn't like what they've done, but I just thought it was a real, I just felt like it was a real disservice to the game, what these guys have done, which is to say, hey, we're going to take the lore, everything you like about Halo, we're going to throw it in the trash, and we're going to make something look cool and be cool the way we think cool is.
What did you think of just the look and the feel of Cortana? Like the way that she was designed, the way that she looks. I mean, because she's very like holographic looking, right? In the show. Are you happy with how she's portrayed or not happy with how she's portrayed?
In that sense, I don't have really a big problem because she had to be, you've got an excellent voice actor, and I can't remember her name right now. But you've got an excellent voice actor, and so it makes sense that you would want her to also be in the show, since you've already hired her. Jen Taylor.
Yeah.
So I get why they've done that. Of course, the Cortana in the video games is obviously much smaller. She appears on the palm of Chief's hand, so you know what I mean. Like, but that's of course the video game, and it's a hologram. So I get it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a huge fan, of what they're doing with Cortana, but in terms of how she's physically portrayed or visually portrayed, I don't have too many negative comments one way or another.
Okay. It's interesting that I'm just looking by the star ratings in IMDb. Episode 1 took a 7.6, which is pretty solid. Then episode 2 took a 7.0, and episode 3 really surprised me by taking a 7.7.
Yeah, but who's giving these ratings?
Well, let me tell you something else interesting. The number of ratings for episode 1, 4,480. For episode 2, 2,261. That's half. Episode 3, 913. It's less.
So what you're getting is a very skewed result because the only people who are staying to watch the show are people who are fans of the show. And the people who are clearly left, right? You're talking about a 75% drop, if not more.
It's dramatic, right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad that way, right? If you think of it that way, it's you're going to when you look at those ratings, you're ultimately going to end up with an echo chamber, right? Because it's all going to be the same people who actually like the show who are reinforcing it.
Yes.
But but as you rightly pointed out, it's the number of people leaving ratings that will actually show you the big picture here.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you on episode 2. I thought was the bridge episode that started going down the wrong path. Episode 1, of course, they had to lay the foundation, and we both thought it was a little bit slow, but it wasn't so detrimental that it was like a series killer. But then episode 2 was where there were just so many changes. There was no action at all, and nothing was really introduced to get us to like any other character. Are we supposed to like Dr. Halsey? Is there any other Spartan that we've really been introduced to? It's very strange. The characters that we've focused on the most are not really the most likable characters in the series.
So Halsey has never been a very likable character, even in the video games, because she has done some horrific things to get to where she is. And in that way, I actually would say that the actor Natasha McAlone, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, I think she's actually portrayed that very well here, in that we're not sure if you want to like her or not like her.
Yeah.
She has done some terrible things to get to where she is today and to get her Spartan program up and running. And so there are some people who love her and there are some people who hate her within the game, right? And within the lore. And that, you can see that here as well. So I don't have a problem with that. Where you start losing me is, you've started adding all these other characters, some who are in the game, but some who aren't. And it seems like they've introduced a lot of people, but they haven't done it in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not articulating this well, but my problem is that I think that on one side, I think that the game is something that you have to kind of follow in terms of lore, because it's an established universe. And on the other side, I also understand that the writers want to do something that we haven't seen before, which is fair enough. But, my argument to them is, don't do something that we haven't seen before just for the sake of doing that, right? Because all you're doing is ultimately shitting on the franchise and shitting on the lore.
I mean, isn't that the promise? I mean, the promise of making a game into a television show is that you now have the time and you've got the medium to expand on a story in ways that a game can't possibly do. Right? So you have the opportunity to take some like fringe storylines or fringe characters and make them like so much more rich and compelling. And I think that's where you and I are both disappointed, which is instead of focusing on the growth of the story and taking what's a very established story and established characters and building on that, they haven't introduced any compelling storylines.
Yeah.
There's no relationship. There's no person that they've really introduced to us and gotten us to know that we're like emotionally invested in that person or that relationship. And I think that's the disappointment, which is there's nothing that I'm worried about. There's nothing that I'm excited about. That they're just kind of like whipsawing me back and forth and like showing me things from this aerial perspective, but I'm not being given anything to get me emotionally invested in any character or any storyline. And I think that's the disappointing part. And we've had 3 different episodes, and they're just kind of like, they're just teetering on jumping from like one thing to another, but they're not focused on the whole reason that I want to see Halo. I want to see the Spartan program. I want to see maybe not constant fights, but I want to see some action. I want to see the suits. I want to see what these super soldiers can do, right? And I'm not getting that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the crux of probably the issue we have, right? Is because they're, on one hand, they're trying to teeter with that they're teetering between that fine line of retreading things that we've already seen in the game, and versus, things that we haven't seen in the game or that we've heard about in the game. But, so like I read an article a couple days ago that the showrunner, Stephen Kane, said that, listen, our writing team didn't look at or talk about the game. We only talked about the characters and the world.
Yikes.
And that's the problem.
Yikes.
That is not what you want to hear as a fan of the video game franchise. Because if that's the case, then why make this a Halo show at all? Why not just make it, some other show that's set in a similar universe and do your own thing there and be totally free with whatever whatever kind of storyline and arcs you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, making a television series based on a very popular show it's a blessing and a curse. And the blessing is that you should immediately have you've got brand recognition, you've got a built-in passionate audience and fan base, you've got a storyline. You don't need to go like smoke a bunch of peyote in some meth cave and come up with a storyline. It's already there for you, right? All you have to do is expand on it. The curse is, of course, that just like with all passionate fan bases, Star Wars, Star Trek being, the most famous, you're automatically going to lose some people because you're never going to portray things the way that people want them to be portrayed. But I think that's not even our criticism here. Our criticism here is that you're not even portraying the stuff that we want to see. You're just creating an entirely new intellectual property that happens to be called Halo. And in the opening scene, you showed the suit and the helmet and the visor, and you're using, Master Chief, and you're using the names and the identifying numbers. But that's really all that this is. Everything else is entirely new and refabricated for no good reason.
Yeah, I almost liken this to the situation we had with Game of Thrones, right? Which is to say, the first 7 series, right, or the first 6 series, whatever the final number was, I think it was 8 overall.
Yeah.
But the first 5, 6, 7 series were really excellent storytelling, and it was an excellent show. And that's, again, because the writers were able to follow the plots of the books, right? The established written lore. George R.R. Martin was there. He was kind of sitting on their head and saying, this is what happened in the book. This is what, and they didn't deviate too far from that.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you compare the first 6 or 7 series of Game of Thrones to the last series of Game of Thrones, where things kind of fell apart, right? And I would take that as the cautionary tale for the writers and the showrunners of Halo, is these guys didn't have written source material, and they went totally off the reservation, and having already seen 7 series and 7 seasons of excellent or of character development, they then kind of said, well, forget about that. Now we've got complete control because we don't have to follow the books because, hey, guess what? There are no more books. We can do whatever we want. And so let's crap on all of that.
There's no more reservation.
Yeah. That's kind of what's happening here, right? Is they're saying, forget about the 7 games or the 8 games or the 5 games or whatever there are of the Halo universe. Forget about all of that. We're going to just start our own universe, our own story with the same characters in that universe. And that's, I think, what's happened is that these guys have, for the sake of saying, hey, we created our own version of Halo for people who aren't video game nerds. I'm sorry, but in doing so, you run the risk of destroying that universe, if not your show, right? And that's exactly what happened with Game of Thrones, which is to say that never before or never have I ever seen another show which one season has completely invalidated the first X number of seasons that preceded it.
Oh, I love the never have I ever. Wow, that's a good one.
Right? So, I mean, think about it, right?
Yeah.
Before season 8 came out, Game of Thrones was what everybody and their mother was talking about. Whether you watched the show or not, it was a part of pop culture, it was a part of the cultural zeitgeist, and it was an important thing. Everyone loved it. But after season 8, who talks about Game of Thrones at all anymore? And if they do, who talks about it in a positive light? That one season, that 13-episode arc did so much damage to all, 60, 80 episodes that preceded it. It's shockingly unfair, but that's exactly what happened.
Pete, is it time for me to make my episodic either hot takes or observations?
I'm all in. What are your hot takes? What are your observations?
So here's my first hot take. Part of the reason that this show is not compelling is that the backdrop is very sterile. A lot of this takes place in Dr. Halsey's laboratory, which is very gray. It's very huge. There's just not a lot of stuff in the background, right? It's just so empty. Maybe part of this is that what we're watching is just not a really engaging environment. If you think about the episode where John went to go visit his friend, right? What's this guy's name?
Soren or Soren?
Yeah, Soren, right? He went to go visit Soren. That was a very dynamic looking rock or planet, right? There was a lot going on there, kind of graffiti in the background. It was a little bit industrial. There was a lot of stuff, right? Apart from that, everything takes place in kind of that United Nations style boardroom, or it takes place in Halsey's laboratory. It's or an empty ship, right? I mean, the ships aren't really that dynamic on the interior. I think this is a very visual, it's a show, right? It's supposed to be very visual. We're not really getting a whole lot of, engagement with the sets that we're looking at. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons that I'm having a problem getting into it as well. Is there any validity to that? What do you think?
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
I'm with you 100%. It's very boring so far in terms of, forget the story. If you're just if I had this on in the background on mute and all I saw were the visual effects, I'd say for a show that's a sci-fi show set in space with people in that kind of armor, I'd just be like, okay, well, that's fine. It seems honestly very boring.
Yeah. So that's my first observation. My second one is more of a criticism that goes beyond just Halo. I really don't like watching shows where there's aliens or other beings and they speak their own language. I mean, I know that's probably authentic, but it's not like I'm watching Narcos and I'm listening to, someone from a cartel speak Spanish to each other. I'm watching aliens with a totally fabricated language, right? And I've got to read the subtitles or understand what they're saying. I understand that that's probably realistic and true to life, but I find it quite annoying, actually.
So you want it to be more like Star Trek, where everyone is speaking English no matter what they are?
Yeah, I kind of do. I mean, I just don't find like there's any benefit to listening to an alien speak alien. It's an entirely fabricated language, right? I don't get anything out of it.
Yeah, that's fine. That it doesn't hurt the show, or for me anyway. I don't think it hurts the show. I don't think it adds any value one way or conversely add any value. So that's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I just feel if I have to listen to like this, I mean, conversation between aliens, and it's entirely an alien, I can't even like pretend to follow along, right? It's not like it's in French and I can pick up a few words, or Spanish and I can kind of understand. Right. It's fabricated. It's impossible to understand, right? So I feel like it's just...
I have to ask, so does that mean that you're a guy who prefers dubs to subs?
Well, I think it depends on the show, right? I mean, like I said, I think it depends on the context. You know, like there's Snowfall, for example, or Narcos, for example, when it's clearly about, you know, like a drug cartel, right? And it's in South America, or it's in Mexico. The fact that the characters speak, you know, Spanish to each other is realistic. And that's kind of what you sign up for, I think, when you watch that show. You know, you can't be upset about it, right? It's about a cartel. So then I'm okay, because usually they also try to, I feel like, minimize it a little bit. So I think I'm a little bit forgiving about that, partly because that's what I signed up for, and partly because I think that, you know, the writers try to minimize it. But Alien is something where it's just impossible to understand. That they're just doing it, I think, not to show off, but to over-engineer a situation where we can probably make a small mental leap, knowing that probably these aliens, the Covenant in this case, don't speak English. You know, they don't speak Queen's English. They don't speak American English. Like, it's okay. We can kind of dispense with that, and we can just kind of go straight to English. And if this was dubbed in a different language, then it would be dubbed in a different language.
It's weird because in the games they do speak all English. They don't use alien language, and we don't
really
subtitles. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. Upon further thought, I'm pretty sure the Arbiter is only speaking in English the whole time. Atriox, all these guys, I'm pretty sure they're all just speaking in English. So
yeah. So those are my two observations. I think the sterile environment is more of a hot take. And as you mentioned, I mean, there's some very wide camera angles here, which I think makes these set pieces, you know, like the backdrops look even more empty. But again, it's just gray, flat, concrete. You know, if you compare it with some of the things that we're used to in either the Star Wars or Star Trek series, you know, which are known for like more light effects and more visual effects, these I just feel are just so open and empty that maybe that's also influencing me in a negative way in terms of how boring these scenes are.
Yeah, I agree with you in principle. I fully understand where you're coming from, only because the difference is we haven't seen anything to, let's say, to counter that, right? Yeah. We haven't seen any major action sequences. I mean, the closest thing to action we got to see in episode 3 was a naked Master Chief cutting out the emotion suppression thing from his butt, or from that eye socket being from Cortana's eyeball thing. You know what I mean? It's just, I think those were the scenes that they're trying to say, hey, guys, we're cool. We've got some cool stuff to show you. Here's Pablo Schreiber's butt, and here's him cutting a metallic thing out of it. You know what I mean? Which is, for me, it seemed a little gratuitous. Yeah. I just don't think it's necessary. Yeah. And I can't help but feel the other problem I have is that they're setting it up in such a way right now that it's going to end up being Master Chief versus the Silver Squad, you know, his own squad.
Yes.
I think what's going to happen is he's going to go off the reservation as far as UNSC is concerned, and his squad is going to be the one that's tasked to get him back or to eliminate him or do something, and that's going to set up and one of them might end up defecting along with him, but that, it's just, there's so many cliches that I can think of, but the way I can't help but feel, because there's that one other Spartan, the other female Spartan, the blonde-haired one.
Yeah.
Who's kind of looking furtively off in the distance at the end of episode 1, and she's the one who's kind of spying on him, cutting that emotion thing out of his butt in episode 3. It's just, they're setting something up in a very inelegant way, and I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
But my feeling is that, she seems like someone who in private has said, hey, we have to support him. He's never led us wrong. But I think she's going to be the one who ultimately says, no, we have to kill him.
Isn't that like the oldest trope? I feel like there should be a montage of like onlookers, like almost every series or movie has like that onlooker who's like kind of peeking around the corner and watching something dodgy go on. And then they're, like their, not their mindset, but their attitude towards someone like totally flips after they see this thing, right? I'd love to see like a montage of how many times that happens. It's really like one of the oldest tropes probably in entertainment, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean by saying it's a little clumsy the way they're doing it, because it's so seemingly obvious. Yeah. And, hats off to them if they actually subvert my expectations on this. But the way the show is going right now, I don't think the writers are interested in subverting anyone's expectations beyond taking a dump on the franchise as it stands.
Yeah.
I think they're more interested in telling their own story with established people, with established lore, which is the wrong way of taking any kind of established media and, making it a TV show or a movie.
I have to say, I'm so disappointed because I'm so apathetic now about this show. That it's taken 3 episodes and maybe even 2 episodes. And if you said like, oh, hey, the new Halo, it just came out, just dropped tonight, I wouldn't like rearrange my schedule to try to watch it. I would wait maybe until I didn't have anything else to do. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. There's a new Halo episode out, I'll check out episode 4. But right now I'm not emotionally invested in any single character. I just want to see Master Chief fight. To be honest, I want him to put his uniform back on, and I want to see a battle. And I'm just not seeing anything. And I don't even see that on the horizon. But I agree. I feel like it's going to be an inter-squad or an inter-Spartan battle. And I'm just unenthused about it. I don't know if I could say it in any other way.
Yeah. Or one of the other Spartans is going to also break out of the mold, and the UNSC or Halsey is going to kill that Spartan and then peg it on Master Chief, and then he has to go on the run. It's going to be one of these cliched ways of, separating Master Chief from the rest of his team and from the Spartan program. And I just, I see it coming, whatever it is. I see something coming, and I know I'm not going to like either of those outcomes or any of those outcomes.
But this is also the problem. Most other shows, even if you think to like dramas like Ozark or something, every episode, Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, every episode, there's a problem, someone new introduced, and then they've got to scramble and find a solution, right? And that's what makes, I think, it so compelling, is that they've got like this clearly laid out plan. Something comes and interrupts a plan. They scramble, they fix it on the run, and they say, okay, well, we'll focus on our other plan later. This is a priority right now. And in this series, I'm just not seeing anything happen. We haven't really seen any, like, it's a very slow forming problem, right? We kind of see it kind of forming in the distance. We've got an idea of what the shape of that problem is going to be. There's going to be some right? Inter-Spartan conflict. We know this is coming somehow, right? Halsey versus her Spartans. Somehow this is coming. But it's 3 episodes, and we haven't really seen any action yet. We haven't even seen like any conflict yet. We haven't seen anything except kind of this little piddly, between Dr. Miranda and Dr. Halsey, between the Admiral and between, her captain. We've just seen some kind of like job description squabbling, right? That's it. That's really it,
Yeah, there's not much more we can say about that.
I think that's right.
Out of the show, it's interesting. There's some soft controversy already brewing. So apparently, and I don't know if they've been doing it for a lot of people, but like there's a couple other reviewers out on YouTube, and Paramount like struck copyright claims on their episode reviews because they were very negative. And I'm not saying that.
Where's our cease and desist letter? Pete, is our cease and desist letter coming?
I'm sure that it will. But I think that, if it is that, like if it was Paramount sending it on purpose just to kind of silence these critics, that is the wrong way to do it. Because, you can't keep Halo's name out of everyone's mouth.
Oh, we're going there already. I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fine line as well, which I agree. The censorship doesn't really work. I understand that some folks are really, really sensitive to criticism, and I'm sure I would be if it was my intellectual property. And I'm sure the writers also feel like, hey, this is a series, like let it breathe a little bit. But this is what happens when you release a series episode by episode, is that you invite this. When you drop a series, all 9 episodes, the first season, all at the same time, then at least you give people the opportunity to view the entirety of your work and make an informed judgment at the end of that season. When you do it one by one, you're trying to naturally build up, a little bit of drama. You're trying to build up a little bit of intrigue, but you're also inviting that type of criticism when an episode doesn't measure up to what someone's expectations are. So if you've chosen that as your distribution format, you can't be frustrated that it's backfired. In fact, you should probably front load then your episodes to make sure that they're pretty wow at the beginning, to try to cut that off. And I think that's the problem, is that they've decided that they're going to take this long-term view. Maybe they've got a 7-season outlook, and it's going to be this whole universe, and in 3 years we'll come back and we'll be totally blown away by what they've created. But I'm not sure if we'll even get there if the first 3 episodes are going to put us to sleep.
If this continues the way it has, I don't see them making it a second season. I just don't see Paramount or Microsoft saying, here's another $200 million or whatever the show cost, make season 2.
Yikes.
Because the problem is that for Microsoft, even though they have all that money, let's be very clear, they're business first, and even they will recognize that the brand value of the video game has to stay positive. And the moment it goes into negative because of a TV show, they will cut the legs off of that TV show to save the video game.
Yeah.
Right? And rightly so, because the video game is far more lucrative than a TV series.
Yeah. Do you have any metrics in terms of how popular or not popular this is on Paramount Plus?
No, actually none.
Yeah.
Actually none, because I don't. So Paramount, again, with most streaming services, it's very hard to get any kind of metric.
Yeah.
But in terms of Paramount, in terms of metrics for Halo, I have no idea. I can just tell you in terms of, anecdotal evidence is that nobody is happy right now.
Yeah, I can say the same thing, that anecdotally, I've seen only negative pieces. And I've tried not to read those because I don't want them to influence me. I mean, if I read 5 negative reviews, somehow I feel like my mindset's going to turn negative. But I can't say that I've seen anyone who's been like, hey, Halo's pretty decent. You guys should check it out. I haven't seen that. I mean, I haven't seen anything like that. Only, I think the most common theme I've seen is Halo. we've alienated gamers. We haven't engaged people that don't know anything about the franchise. You know, it's always that type of take.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Do you think we have anything more to say about Halo, or should we wait until next episode? We'll review number 4 when it drops, and let's see where we come out on it.
Yep, I agree. I think that's the best way to look at it.
Before we go, Pete, what do we have in our next episode? I think we need to turn around this negativism. Let's focus on something positive. What do we have our next episode?
So we're going to talk about, I think, Winning Time next, right?
Winning Time. I'm so excited about Winning Time. Like even the decibels of my voice are changing.
Just the mention of it has woken me up. You know,
I
think that's probably how you do an episodic weekly by weekly release.
Spoiler alert. We're very happy about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so catch us next episode. We will talk about Winning Time. Where are we on Winning Time, by the way? We've already seen 1 and 2 and 3, so we're focused on 4 and 5 now. Is that right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, everybody. Join us next episode, Winning Time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.